Well, for a little bit more reaction on the news of the withdrawal of French and European troops in Mali, we're now joined by Oxfam's West Africa Regional Director, Assalama Dawalack Sidi. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program. We are struggling to hear you. Can you just check that you're unmuted?
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for your time. There's been tension between Mali and France for a long time now, and some of the European allies. So perhaps it's not a surprise to see there was this withdrawal, but what are your fears in terms of immediate consequences if the French troops and European allied troops withdraw quickly, as Mali seems to be demanding?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that in Oxfam, this withdrawal is for us a terrible admission for a failure, because the military troops, especially the French one, have been in Mali since 10 years. And unfortunately, the security crisis was not managed, and the humanitarian crisis has even worsened. And this is really Oxfam's biggest concern, because we have seen a lot of people needing humanitarian assistance. To give you some numbers, in Mali right now, 7,500,000 people are in humanitarian need, and around 1.2 million people are in severe food crisis. This is just a terrible situation for Mali. And we're really concerned about that humanitarian crisis.
All right, so you're saying that the French troops were not helping as much as they could have with their presence?
Well, the military solution is not the right one to address the issue in Mali. We strongly believe in Oxfam that what needs to be addressed is the root causes of the inequalities in Sahel and in Mali. And we have been warning the Sahel leaders as well as the partners, all the decision makers, that they shouldn't only focus on the security, on the military intervention, but listen to the community members, take into account community members, and try to bring back that social contract between leaders and communities that unfortunately has broken down. So unless the root issues of inequalities in Sahel and Mali are addressed, we in Oxfam believe that this is going to be continuing for years again.
Would this help explain why it seems some citizens are quite happy to see France leaving, that they feel that perhaps that they've been let down?
The frustration from the population have started actually a while ago. People have been expressing their frustrations because they felt like they were not being listened and their basic rights are not being addressed. In Oxfam West Africa, we have recently launched a report to find out how Sahel leaders and West African leaders are respecting their commitment to reducing inequality. And unfortunately, the report reveals again that West African leaders are the least committed to reducing inequality. So the movements that we are seeing now in Sahel, especially in Burkina Faso, in Mali, are exactly this frustration that, their own needs are not being met and they're not being listened to. And we in Oxfam believe that people need to be listened to. Community members, local civil society organizations, especially women and young people, need to be listened to. And any strategy that should address the issue in Mali or in Sahel should take into account the voices of men, women, and young people in this, part of Africa.
The Malian authorities are wanting the French troops to leave quite quickly. Do the Malian troops have any kind of capacity in the short term? Because you're talking about this urgent need for humanitarian aid, and one gets a sense that that might be compromised, particularly in the short term.
Well, you know, I mean, we are not in a position to judge which military force has the capacity or not, because we're not a security expert. We have a humanitarian mandate. But when we listen to this, tension, we become even more concerned. And, we become even more concerned because at the end of the day, the people who would suffer are the civilians and the most vulnerable ones. So for us, there's a need to call on the Malian authorities, on their partners, on the Sahelian leaders, so that whatever strategy is used, that strategy listens to community members. And whatever strategy is used to address the security issue, that strategy should really put emphasis on civilian protection. Because unfortunately, we are so concerned about the number of deaths. Let me give you an example. In 2021, almost 2,000 civilians were dead. And among those 2,000 civilians, 246 of them were dead, under military and force, reaction. So these are some of the concerns that we have. And when we see tension arising and disagreement, we're even more concerned that, again, the most vulnerable people pay the price of that, divergence.
Talking about the most vulnerable people, has it been difficult for you as an organization to get access to people in need because of the insecurity?
Sometimes access is very difficult. And unfortunately, those displaced people, 360,000 people in Mali have fled their communities, leaving everything behind them, their fields, their livestock, and sometimes it's quite difficult to access those people and provide them the humanitarian assistance that they do need. That's definitely an issue.
I know that you can't comment really on capacity and what the choices that are being made by the authorities. The military junta has decided that it wants to stay in power until 2025, and this is part of the challenge. ECOWAS, in response, has put sanctions on Mali. Does that further put strain on trying to help the people inside Mali, that they're sitting with sanctions as well?
These sanctions are terrible. They're just worsening the humanitarian situation. Mali depends on its neighbors, for instance, for food importation. Mali's health system in 2019 functioned because of, 33% of the budget that allowed the health system to function came from external donors. So again, these sanctions are impacting even more the most vulnerable people. And that's why Oxfam, alongside with other international and national organizations, have called on ECOWAS to review these sanctions, because at the end of the day, again, the people who would suffer are the most vulnerable ones, the ones who are already struggling to get food, the ones who are struggling to get potable water. And money sometimes comes from diaspora. People living in France, in the United States, this diaspora sends cash to community members in Mali. And this cash often helps them. So if people can send cash to their own parents in Mali, you can imagine how the issue could be even worse in the upcoming months.
All right. So it sounds as if your message to ECOWAS is their intention to try and manage the military junta. The unintended consequence is that millions of Malians are the ones actually suffering as a result of these actions.
Exactly, exactly. At the end of the day, who would suffer? Who would suffer is really the community members and the most vulnerable ones.
All right.
That's exactly the point. That's why we call on ECOWAS to review these sanctions.
Ms. Sidi, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and giving us some insights into the challenging situation that Malians are facing at this time. Thank you.
I thank you for inviting me too. Thank you very much.